when the right people come together at the right moment, when they care almost as much about winning as they do about each other, they can become the best of the best.
Welcome to the best soccer show. The best soccer show in the whole world.
Here we go. It's the best soccer show. Jason Davis with you on a Thursday night in the usual spot. Thank you for joining me and soon somebody else. It won't be just me for the entire duration of this show. I promise you. You've been dealing with Solo Jason quite a bit. Speaking of Solo Jason, I will remind you that the Best Soccer Show Patreon has daily updates from me, talking about whatever's on my mind, world of soccer, sometimes personal stuff, not too personal, just, like general ramblings and things. So support us on the Patreon at patreon.com/thebestsoccershow. You can obviously, leave us a rating or review. That's a big help to the show. No matter where you listen or watch, if you're on YouTube, thank you for hanging out. I see we got people in the chat. My man Holden Cribb is here. Shout out to Holden. My man Tom Opp is in the building. What's up, Tom Opp? I got Stuart. All right, here we go. Jason, my man Jason, says bonjour. He's so cultured, Jason. He's very, very cultured. Trooper Barry's in the building as well. Thank you very much. Everybody who's watching us live on YouTube, if you do not know, we do the show live on YouTube on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. Look for the Best Soccer Show, subscribe, like, all those things. All right, we have a lot of things to get to today. I have a full show planned for you. I'm going to get our guest in here momentarily, but before we came on the air today, just before, some news broke in the world of American soccer, and that's this news. The Gold Cup draw happened. Did you know the Gold Cup draw was happening today? Well, now you do. Here it is, your draw for the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. As you can see, the United States men's national team has been drawn with Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago. Why has it got to be TNT? Like, why is it always got to be TNT? And then Saudi Arabia, the guest team in this tournament. So that'll be interesting. If you're wondering, obviously Mexico there, Costa Rica, Suriname, Dominican Republic, they should coast through. Costa Rica could be a bit of a challenge. The Dominicans are no pushover, by the way. Let's not forget the Dominican Republic has made great strides in our sport in recent years, despite the fact that they still produce baseball players like it's going out of style. Group B is Canada, Honduras, El Salvador, and Curacao. Panama, Jamaica, Guatemala, and Guadeloupe in Group C. And I do believe Connor is correct. I believe that we did get Qatar as one of the guest teams, or the guest team last time around, if I'm remembering that tournament. They were in a couple of them, right? I think Qatar was in a couple of Gold Cups. You know what? I see my man, let's see, winner of USA, KSA, sets oil prices for the next month. All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I see my man, Dan Vaughn is here. I'm going to bring Dan in. Dan's nodding along. And Dan, I know you have thoughts on this in addition to what you and I are set to talk about specifically. First of all, shout out to Dan Vaughn. If anybody knows, it's very small type there because I have the Gold Cup draw. But editor of ProtagonistSoccer.com, covering the lower divisions of American soccer, probably better than anybody else out there. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jason. Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I will tell you, the Gold Cup draw was not on my radar. I consider myself to be a pretty big U.S. men's national team fans. We were discussing
how many jerseys? How many? How many?
Last count, I believe, was 23 is what I have. I work hard. Okay. I have a very tolerant wife.
I'm gonna give you. I don't even know what the right. Is this like?
Damn, dog, that's inappropriate.
That sounds like an inappropriate number of jerseys to own. When you have how many kids? I know you have a new one. You have an older one. You have at least two.
Yeah, I do. I have an older one, and I've also got a 6-month-old. But I will tell you that in her case, because my wife is Mexican-American, she has probably more L3 kits than she has USA kits. So,
I didn't know you were coming up in a split household there. I didn't know you were raising the kids with some allegiance issues that may pop up. Now, I've talked about it on my show. My wife is Puerto Rican. Probably my son's not going to choose the Puerto Rican national team if it comes down. Probably. I mean, I'm not saying that. I believe they are called Huracán Azul, the blue hurricane for some reason. I don't know why Puerto Rico's the blue hurricane, but maybe he'll choose them. But
I will.
okay.
L3 always has better kits than the United States. That's without a doubt. Adidas always kills it. I love that black and gold one this year. Oh,
it's pretty good.
It's beautiful.
It's good.
But I'll tell you what I do love is Group D. That feels like a winnable group for us.
Yes.
Given some of our struggles, maybe it's nice that we got an easy pass out of the group stage.
Yeah, I mean, we would not, I mean, at the same time, though, what are we talking about here? We're talking about trying to get the level of this team up. I know that it was not a good experience in Los Angeles for the Nations League finals, but if we're talking about the goal being do something at the World Cup in 2026, you want as many challenges as possible. And I guess, get out of the group, and then you get your challenges in the knockout phase, such as they are in CONCACAF. Right, Dan?
No, 100%. I think you're right. I mean, all of those top teams out of each group all should be expected to advance. USA just feels like lately we can't get past ourselves. We make dumb mistakes. We play to the level of our opponents. We don't bring our A game or B game, sometimes our C game. And so because of that, it's funny you mentioned the Trinidad and Tobago being here. That might get some fire in Christian Pulisic, maybe. I mean, I remember how he reacted whenever we lost that game back in the day. Maybe we'll see some fire again from him because he's played really flat lately.
Yeah, perhaps. I can't tell you that I'm like super enthusiastic for the Gold Cup. I can't. And yet I know. And again, we sort of how this is being approached and all of those things, I think, is still kind of up in the air. But anyway, that's sort of the U.S. men's national team portion of this program. We could do an Americans Abroad review where it's everybody's situation right now. I don't really get a lot of value out of that at the moment. We'll see what happens when we get to the next call-up and the U.S. men's national team has a reason to be on the field together. The reason to bring in Dan Vaughn of ProtagonistSoccer.com is because we have big news in the world of lower division soccer. And this isn't just USL's making noise about a first division and Pro Rel, which I think we've talked about on this show, and you absolutely can get more content about from Dan, but from Morning Kick Around, which I'm doing on YouTube as well. But the news is out that the Sunday match between San Antonio, which I put on my this is a training kit, just to be clear. It's a training kit San Antonio sent me. I'm a big fan of this one. And then Phoenix Rising. I also have a Phoenix Rising. It's slightly less impressive, which is why I'm not wearing it. They did a really good number on television, Dan. What was that number?
They did, yeah. That game was broadcast on CBS, real CBS, right? I know that all of these big networks have like 1,000 different channels you can go to, and this is the real CBS. And that match drew 444,000 viewers. And they said that's the low number, with the peak. That means people popping in, maybe not for the whole match, but for a couple of minutes. 760,000. It's the most watched match in USL League history on CBS. Granted, they haven't had a lot of them on there, but certainly they have had some. And this was a big spike. This was a big get.
I think yeah, and I would love. This is the state of American soccer, right? I would love to just leave it there. What a great number for USL in that game on Sunday, broadcast on CBS. Wow, that's so great. This could be big thing. But of course we have to do, what does it mean, Dan? What does it mean? And I have people in my life, a certain individual who I do a radio show with on a
WNBC.
Who sees this as pretty significant in what it means. I don't know if it's just about USL. It's kind of also about setting USL up against MLS, because we always have to do that in American soccer. There's always a some sort of battle happening. Obviously, soccer wars is a thing we say. So what does it mean, Dan?
I think that it's important to put it within context. We're currently USL Championship is a Division II league. And when we compare those numbers to MLS, we're comparing that to a Division I league. And so there's a context difference there, right? And I also think that it's important to remember that from a USL perspective, they have big changes coming that they hope are going to drive these numbers even higher, right? And you mentioned those at the beginning. If it's the launch of their Division One league, if it's the application of promotion relegation to their different leagues, those are all things that I think in USL's mind should trigger more viewers to come to this. And so if this is the base number they're working at as a Division Two, how can they extrapolate that and go to, say, CBS and say, look, this is what we're doing as a Division Two league. What are we going to do whenever we're a Division One league and we've got promotion relegation going on? Those are the kinds of, I think, selling points that USL wants to draw out of this moment and apply to these numbers and say, look what we could do. I think it's also important to think about it in context. Currently, MLS numbers are kind of a black box because of the Apple deal. And so that becomes really difficult to know who's actually watching these matches and how many viewers they're getting. We just don't really know, and they don't really have to tell us. We do have some numbers. The MLS Cup final from last year, LA Galaxy played New York Red Bulls, drew 468,000 viewers, which is technically, and it's in that same ballpark. That's a cup final. And the 2023 MLS Cup final, which featured LAFC, which I think is an important thing if you look at the numbers, 890,000 viewers. I think that if you look at MLS viewership, it's much more focused on which teams are playing. That becomes a really important, like what markets are involved. If you can get LA involved, if you can get New York involved, I think that from an MLS perspective, that's a big win. I think that you could also say that maybe USL is a little less tribal yet. It might become that way over time. And I think that the average USL fan might say, I'm not a fan of Louisville City or San Antonio FC or Phoenix Rising, but I want to support the league doing this major broadcast. I'll watch it. And so I think that you might see that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair read. I think I agree with that. This is such a boring situation now that I agree with everything that Dan just said. And I will point it out at the risk of kind of beating a dead horse here. And I hope most people think this, and I think they do. I mean, I think there are obviously very ardent supporters of leagues and clubs and various ways of doing things, and people who have maybe been around since '96 when it comes to MLS, and people who are sort of coming to USL maybe because it had the potential for pro-rel or because they're opening up smaller markets to American soccer, which is a thing MLS is not doing. But I think it's pretty clear that you don't have to pick a horse here, right? This is not either or. This is so hopefully everything is working to the direction of benefiting American soccer. I'm trying to put my cynicism aside about the way MLS operates and the idea of a Ponzi scheme and all this stuff that people throw out, Dan, which I'm sure you've run into once or twice.
I may have said that before.
You may have said it. Who knows? I mean, again, there are things we can pick apart or pick at about all of these operations, right? I mean, Chattanooga's Open Cup match kind of brought to the fore some of those hard feelings that Chattanooga soccer fans have against the USL. And here the USL a week earlier, or a couple days earlier, had sort of been the white knight riding in to save American soccer by providing an opportunity for pro-rel. Everything is important within the context in which it's happening, right? And then again, we should be happy that there are people willing to watch any time of day, on any channel, at any point, a match between a San Antonio team and a Phoenix team, again, in a league that is not building $500 million stadiums or whatever it costs to build an MLS building these days.
I really think that's a great point, Jason, that in the end, this is about the hopeful rise of American domestic soccer, regardless of league, beginning to gain a foothold among soccer fans in the United States. We know there's a lot of soccer fans in the United States. Unfortunately, most of them, from an American, from a domestic point of view, are watching Liga MX or watching a European league right now. And that's the way it's been for a long time. If we could see the development of, say, the USL system, if it's the championship, if it's this Division One league that's going to launch, or the rise of MLS, all of those things hopefully create soccer fans in the United States. And I think we all win from that. And especially if you think about how markets operate. If you're a soccer fan, you're going to probably gravitate to the soccer team that's playing in your neighborhood or down the street or in your city. And so that's an opportunity. And anytime this moment comes when you've got 500,000 fans watching a match on TV, that's an opportunity to gain those fans and hopefully plug them into the soccer systems in the United States.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. I really do. I hope that again, the idea should be in the big picture for American soccer, as many professional clubs as we can get, as the marketplace. I hate to be kind of corporate-y sounding, but the marketplace will handle. And again, this is a lot about, because those of us who are veterans of the soccer wars will tell you, like, the thing we don't want is to keep salting the ground or salting the earth behind clubs that come and go. I mean, I hate to use these metaphors, but feels like we've had a number of places where a club pops up, people get really excited, something goes wrong, the ownership was never really committed, or there's the numbers don't add up because they rarely do immediately. And then that club either dies or pulls up stakes, and then we have to start this process all over again. And not to dehumanize sports fans in each of these towns, but it kind of becomes like you're retraining people to accept that soccer is not just something that is there for a couple of summers and then is gone. Like, you want it to be consistent in their lives. And you and I may not be around to see the ultimate fruits of this labor, Dan. That's a hard thing for us to kind of swallow.
I'm facing my own humanity here. I would say, Jason, that I think that there's been a lot of antagonism between the different leagues, and that has also not helped the situation. It is the leagues are consistently trying to take each other's territory. We've seen this with, you talked about, fans getting excited. What happened in San Diego when there were a lot of fans for San Diego Loyal, and then San Diego, I think it's FC, is that what it is now, decided they were coming to town, and San Diego Loyal, the ownership was like, well, we're out, and that's it. And that's not the kind of thing you see in other countries, right? Where there's more of an established soccer tradition where there can be multiple professional clubs within a city and they can compete. They can show up at, if it's an open cup or if it's other like competitions or friendlies between the clubs, there's opportunities for them to play each other. In the United States, because of the closed systems, oftentimes those clubs never play each other. You mentioned Chattanooga. That's a great example of two clubs that had never played each other across the 6-7 years that they had been in the same city, operating around each other. And this is the opportunity to see them play. And we got, some fan running out there and planting a flag in the middle of the field.
Yeah, we had an attempt. We had a kid and a fan. By the way, I think that guy has been in the morning kick around comments, and I'm going to work out trying to talk to the guy who planted the flag in Chattanooga. I know we've kind of, as a soccer country, moved on a bit. I mean, but I still think there's something interesting to that story. You really thought it was a good idea to go try to plant a flag in the artificial surface of Finley Stadium for rivalry reasons. But again, this is how stuff is born. All right, Dan was here to talk about television ratings, and I know he has a 6-month-old child, so I don't know how long I can keep him. But I do have something else that I think is worth kind of diving into, and if you have a couple more minutes,
absolutely,
you're free to disappear at any point, and you will not have to apologize. Irish
if I hear
screaming
from the other room.
Okay. I want to bring up the schedule situation, the calendar situation for Major League Soccer. And a lot of people will probably know, if you're very online like I am and like Dan is, that we had word that today, on Thursday, April 10th, Major League Soccer had an opportunity to vote on swapping their schedule, their calendar from the current start early in the year and finish late in the year to a more European style. Now, I think there are people that take issue with calling this a global calendar because there are other countries that play on our calendar, even though I think some of them are in the Southern Hemisphere where the winter and summer seasons are swapped. But the idea is that there's not everybody follows the exact same calendar. But for the most part, right, developed football world. That's probably not right. That probably gets me into trouble too. Got to be careful with that. Okay, European football for the most part plays on this calendar of fall to spring, early summer. And Major League Soccer was considering it. Now, I think we first got inkling of this or word of this more than a year ago. I think I was reading a Lizzie Besserano piece at ESPN where she mentioned it as a possibility. Don Garber addressed it at the State of the League address that he does around MLS Cup back in December. And Major League Soccer was reportedly, through a story at the Sports Business Journal, considering voting on this. Now, I was all excited to come on this show, Dan, and talk about the vote. Didn't happen. They tabled it. And what that means is they absolutely cannot get this done before 2027 at the earliest. And they put out a statement to that effect. First of all, what thoughts do you have about the calendar that American soccer follows? Because I think, it's part of our culture in some ways, but it doesn't feel always like it's the best thing for us.
I think that calendars are complicated in the sense of, one, in the United States, there's so many other competing sports that there's a lot going on. And a lot of times, soccer doesn't want to go head to head with, say, the NFL, or it doesn't want to go head to head with the NBA finals, or whatever it is. There are just other competing, very popular things that are going on, particularly on TV. And that becomes a challenge when you are the upstart. You're the one trying to take it. And while soccer is not the upstart in other parts of the world, in the United States, it certainly is. And so there has been resistance to that. And also, because of the geography of the United States, the weather is an issue, right? It's been a problem that has been brought up repeatedly. Well, what are you going to do in upstate New York in December when you're trying to play soccer? And I think it's interesting, if you've watched the USL Super League, the Division I Women's League, they're playing on that calendar. And it's a league that we've been following closely. And I will tell you, as someone that has watched that league pretty extensively, I podcast about it. The Super Show, we talk about that league a lot. There have been times when the weather hasn't been great. Kentucky, Lexington has played in basically raining conditions the entire season, and it has been a challenge for them to draw fans. Is that I would say, does that mean that we can't do it? No, it just might mean that there might be things that you have to consider that might impact it. And I think that Major League Soccer is always going to be the reacting to other leagues trying new things and saying, is it worth it for us to do it? Is it worth us sacrificing the way things have been done to do it? It's a very corporate approach, and we shouldn't be surprised by that. I'm sure you're not. No. And the fact that it's been tabled, what a surprise. They're a very low risk taking organization. They have a lot of money at the top, the people that own those clubs. They don't want to risk those things. And I think it would be easy for them to say, why would we tinker with something if it's quote unquote worked so far for us? The good thing about going to a European schedule is that when it comes to transfer windows and the ability to attract talent in a way that might fit better into the European calendar, that's one way you get it. You oftentimes get these weird loans at the end of the European schedule where we get them for a couple of months at the end of a season to slap into a team. And that's kind of just a complicated aspect of the difference in schedules. But it's one of those things that I, as a fan, I kind of wonder if it's as big a deal to the vast majority of fans as it is for a very loud minority number of those fans.
I think you're probably right about that. Now, the thing that for every pro, there's a pretty strong con, and almost for every argument, there's sort of an inverse argument, right? So here's a good example of it. This is from our guy Jason in the chat. Does MLS really want to compete with NFL, NCAA football, etc.? Now, I will say that if you have the middle of your season, that portion, and you start in August and you finish in June or May, then you're going to have a large portion of your season, pretty much from September all the way through the end of the calendar year, and even into January and February for the NFL, where you are competing on weekends with the NFL. However, as things sit now, people would say, well, your most important games are happening while the NFL and NCAA football are happening. So you're burying the biggest games, whereas if you switch the calendar, at the very least, even if you have to compete with football a little bit more or a lot more through the middle of your season, you get a more open world to push your biggest games, because you'll really be only dealing with potentially baseball, but I guess playoffs for NBA and hockey could be on that list as well. What do you make of that argument, Dan?
Again, I think that, like you said, there's pros and cons to both sides. I'll tell you that the USL Super League took a break in mid-December, and that break lasted through the end of January.
So let me ask you that, because again, this is something that came out of the meetings or some of the discussions and the reporting was that lots of MLS owners are like, we're going to do a 2-month pause. How do we maintain momentum in a season with a 2-month pause? How do we sell season tickets to somebody who's like, there's a 2-month break? What the hell? My life might be completely different by the time you start playing again. So I know the Super League is not an apples to apples comparison, but how was that break received?
I think that for fans of the Super League, it was fine. For our podcast, we took some time off and then came back. That was great. But I will tell you that that is certainly an adjustment that you would have to like basically convince your fans to do. And that is a challenge. Again, talking about pros and cons, these are things that have to be considered. And if you're a risk averse owner of an MLS franchise, you probably don't want to do this. This is not something you want to do. And again, I would argue that the people that are the most pro of when it comes to the European calendar are, I think, a very small minority of American fans. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea, and I want to be clear on that. Like, I guess as a fan or as someone that covers the sport, I think it's it's not that big of a deal from my perspective. I think like I said, it's a big deal to some people. I don't think for the vast majority of fans it really matters. And I would also argue that if that midseason break comes, then everyone switches over to American football and watches the playoffs and enjoys themselves and comes back to their soccer team at the end of it.
That's true. That is true. Like that break would kind of coincide with some of the toughest competition on television. That's a good point. In fact, I was working. So I kind of wanted to be able to visualize these things, right? Because I'm not always the best sort of thinking about these things in abstract. So there have been sort of attempts to give us, I don't know, at least some sort of look at how this might go down. So let me see if I can bring in, and I believe there's at least one small kind of discrepancy here because of the way MLS has it's been reported how MLS would apply this. But this is, let me get this one off the screen, put that one up. This is a 2025, just the 2025 portion, not going into 2026, which would obviously be after a break and all those things. But you can see, I suppose this is the way that Kevin Wallace, who's over, Mr. Kevin Wallace on Blue Sky, I believe is his name, and he's on the Post Cincy, does a podcast on FC Cincinnati, just kind of giving us an idea. Now, he didn't include the key here, but he did pass the key along to me, so let me just pull that up so I can give you an idea. Green is regular season, yellow is playoffs, red is FIFA match dates, and blue would be the quote-unquote off-season. So again, you get all the way down to December 21st, and that would be the winter break starts. He did include that in the description over there. So, again, we're talking about, leaving open that space for the summer where MLS is constantly competing with international soccer, in its own sport and has to deal with MLS players going away or deciding if they're going to take a break. We know they're going to take some sort of break. I think it's a couple weeks for the Club World Cup this year because it's on American soil. And they've committed to a break next year for the World Cup, but have not said whether they're taking the whole thing off or half of it off. We don't know, but of course that's happening here. It seems odd to be competing against the World Cup with your own domestic league. And that's why I think people, Dan, were thinking they need to get this done so they can use that. We're going to pause the World Cup and a big break before you go into the new calendar the fall after the World Cup or the late summer after the World Cup. And I guess, again, the logistics of this, sort of the work to be done to make sure you're prepared is just a heavy lift.
Well, the schedule congestion has been something that MLS has long been criticized for, the addition of so many sort of extracurricular competitions that allow MLS to make more money off their teams has always been sort of a consistent criticism of, and it's funny because they're the first ones to complain about schedule congestion when they're oftentimes creating their own problems. And I guess, anytime you talk about shaking up something as big as this, it would obviously create a lot of cascading effects into other competitions. And how does that impact the Open Cup? How does it impact a lot of the CONCACAF competitions that go on? There's just a lot there that really has to be worked out. And I for better or for worse, it would be interesting to see how that would play out.
Yeah, and you're talking about the on-the-field stuff. All important, probably the most important thing. But let's not forget that the league has commercial contracts and player contracts that would all have to be reworked. Every contract essentially with a player that extended through whatever change you're doing would have to be broken and rewritten and re-signed. So now you're just dealing, again, it's not that it can't be done. It's just a lot of work to get it done. And it's been pointed out several times in the chat. Shout out to Trooper Barry and I think a couple other people that Japan's done this, or they're working on it. They're not quite there, but they've put into motion the plan to switch their calendar. And I'll admit that I have not read all of the material on this. I would suggest that anybody who wants to catch up on how Japan is doing this, go look for Dan Orlowitz. Is that right? Dan, do you know Dan Orlowitz?
That name is familiar to me.
He is on Blue Sky and Twitter under the same name. It's Aishi Teru Tokyo, AISHITERU Tokyo.bluesky.com is where I follow him. And he's based in Japan. He's based in Japan, and he's given us a big, long explanation that anybody wants to go read. Here's Trooper Barry. J-League switching to fall spring for 2026-27, but talks about the change have been going since the 2000s. So we're talking like almost 20 years. It's wild to think it's coming together in the U.S. this quickly. It's kind of not. I mean, they could still do this. They have tabled it. There very well could be a vote. I threw up the statement earlier. I'll do it again. Major League Soccer's Board of Governors said that they are going to move into a second phase of exploration. Any potential changes would not take effect until the 2020-27 season at the earliest. That leaves them, that's wiggle room. That's basically saying it might not happen then, right? It could be a thing we decide not to do.
Right.
I do think it's fascinating they are considering it, though, because what I think, if you look at the psychology of this, Dan, and I know the CSOs, all the chief soccer officers are like, hey, I can't sign the guy we need because the team doesn't want to give him up. They're in the middle of their season in January. They don't want to sell him to us, but we know he'd be great here. And they're probably going to their owners, and they're crying foul about this. So the soccer side I get. The ownership side, if they are honestly pondering it, it means they might see whether it's the Apple deal is paywalling the league too much and they need to find a way to stand out, or they really do think the NFL during the playoffs competing with them and college football, right? I had my radio producer today said, I don't care about the schedule switch, just don't put the MLS Cup final on the same day as the SEC championship game.
Yep.
Right? Because for him, the SEC championship game took precedence over the MLS Cup final, and he's a giant Atlanta United fan. Right, his team wasn't in it, so maybe that would have made a difference. But he was choosing, as a fan of the league, he was choosing that other thing over soccer because the league put him in no position, did put him in a bad position. So, yeah, I don't know.
I would offer one other point, and that I think we may be seeing the Division I leagues, if it's USL, if it's the NWSL or MLS, feeling pressure from what USL is doing. We saw that in the NWSL eliminating the draft after the USL Super League came out saying they weren't going to have it. We may be seeing a similar conversation about scheduling, and it could be that these Division I leagues are feeling even if it's the slightest pressure. Again, these are risk-averse people, and they're not going to make decisions or consider these kind of moves unless they feel pressure to do so. And I kind of wonder if USL is acting sort of as a change agent within U.S. soccer. Again, and I go back to what you said earlier about the Chattanooga situation. I don't think they have a perfect track record or the cleanest of hands, but I would argue that they've been creative in trying to differentiate themselves.
Well, that's because they are competing against a much more moneyed competition in MLS. So of course you have to do that. I mean, again, I'm not going to tear down any league competition that is maybe doing things in its own self-interest, but also pushing the game forward in the United States. What I'm saying? There could be, again, there's a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other for all of these competitions, all these leagues, all these operators. It doesn't mean they could get away with whatever they want and just throw it under the heading of, well, we're doing it because it's good for us. I do think there are lines you can cross. But I think for the most part, and again, this is sort of something I talk about a lot, Dan, and you and I may have talked about this at some point, that we exist in a country, and this game is trying to grow in a country that has no cohesive cultural identity. We don't all think about soccer the same way because we don't have a collective history with soccer. We don't go back 80 years with all thinking about the same clubs and the same leagues and the same players. there's no Babe Ruth of soccer is basically kind of what I'm saying, to kind of tie us together. So everybody's got their own idea, and everybody thinks that their way is the better way and the right way and all those things. So, and we also have very strong antitrust laws in this country. So you can't go diving into things and say, well, if only that league would do everything itself, or if only U.S. Soccer would tell everybody how to do it. No, none of that works, right? When Pablo Maurer dropped his, back in the 80s, they had a pro-rel plan for American soccer. When he dropped that story this week, there is a quote in there from Sunil Gulati, not everybody loves, but he's right when he says, we never did anything with it because we would have been sued. Nobody can tell leagues you have to do pro-rel in this country. Nobody gets to tell a business how to run as what is nominally just an organizing body authorized by Congress on some weird line item. I mean, none of this is held together by much more than Scotch tape, Dan. Is that right? Am I right about that?
I think that is certainly a fair description. I would also argue that it gives us a lot of freedom to interpret the game and do creative things. Some people have been critical.
Absolutely.
We think about you watch that grainy footage from the mid 90s of the MLS shootouts and the way that they're so different from European shootouts. Maybe that's something that we could do differently. There's a lot of freedom, and it's interesting to watch the competition between Euro fans and the way in which they wish that the American system worked perfectly as the European system does, as if there are no issues in the European system.
Right.
And I get it. Like, that's soccer's been going on there for 130 years now. I totally understand that.
And that's what it is. It's like, we've been doing it for this long. It must be the right way to do it. And if you're not doing it the way we've been doing it for 100 years, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
And in some cases, there are absolutely wrong things that have been done under the banner of American soccer. But in some cases, it's a unique situation. It's again a disconnected soccer culture. It's the fourth or fifth or sixth sport for most of the country. So a lot of things are kind of part of that, right? And you already mentioned, people are watching the Premier League and Liga MX more than they're watching their domestic leagues, and that's not a thing most of these countries have to deal with. Dan Vaughn, protagonistsoccer.com. I am going to let him go and get back to his family. I feel bad. And his 23 U.S. men's national team jerseys. And
it's going to go roll in a pile.
That would be amazing. It's like, you could Scrooge McDuck your jerseys? Holy crap, Dan. You can Scrooge McDuck your soccer. Because, by the way, it's not just 23. Go ahead. Tell them about how many other ones you have.
I've got somewhere between 80 and 90 club kits also. I only have the 23 national teams. That's only the U.S. I don't have any other national team jerseys. And in fact, I bought a Jamaica one at one point. Felt so guilty. I gave it to my wife, and she sort of wears it around the house sometimes. But I would feel too guilty wearing any other colors other than the U.S.
That is incredible. That's just incredible. So if I'm going to do my math right, you have 113 individual soccer, roughly. We're talking.
Roughly,
you haven't counted. You lose count sometimes because one might go, what happened to that? Do you have an organizing? Okay, this is not going to turn into the Dan Vaughn Kit Master podcast.
So I'm lucky that I have an office that I'm able to do soccer stuff in, and I have a closet in there, and basically the left side is all club shirts, and then the right side is US shirts and various track suits and track jackets that I've collected over the years that I have several Ajax jerseys. I'm wearing one today. And I have several of their track jackets. I like those jackets, so I buy those. So basically it's roughly organized that way. And I'll tell you that while it's a lot of big name clubs, I certainly have a lot of Manchester United jerseys. Haven't been a United fan for quite a while. I have a lot of lower league soccer. Hey, that's fair. Right now, that's what you're pointing to, where they are on the table right now. That's correct.
Right. That's right.
Down there is where they're at on the table. Yeah. So
okay. You could go 3.5 months without wearing anything but a soccer jersey every day. That's pretty incredible. Dan Vaughn, everybody go support Protagonist Soccer. Again, they got they got some great stuff on Chattanooga, and obviously a bunch of lower division stuff in America. Dan, thank you for stepping in. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna let you go now. Thank you so much.
Always willing to come on, Jason. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
There goes Dan Vaughn on the program. So it's helping me out because I've been K solo for a couple of weeks. I want to shift now to some other things, and it may roughly lines up with a story I saw at Urban Pitch. You guys know Urban Pitch? website, Street Soccer Culture. Anyway, this story popped up on Urban Pitch, I think yesterday. You can see it's Kelvin Loyola wrote it. I actually reached out to Kelvin Loyola to try to get him on the show today. He was in Brazil. He lives in Uruguay, but he was in Brazil doing some work, and he couldn't join us. May still try to get him on something I'm doing at some point. But he wrote this story. Where have all the Americans in MLS gone? And it's not something I've thought about, I would say, recently. I've thought about it in general terms. I've thought about the way Major League Soccer was supposed to be, and I guess we can talk about whether it still is, a place for the American soccer player. Now, whether you need to sort of state that out loud and make that a guiding principle, like when you guys go to work, some of you, and I've worked in corporate environments, so I'm no stranger to this. Sometimes they'll be like, "This is our mantra. This is our mission statement." Isn't that what it's called? Mission statement. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Mission statements. I don't know if you need to state this out loud as a mission statement if you're not Major League Soccer. Okay, if you're the Premier League, if you're the Bundesliga, if you're Serie A, any league really of some note, and even the smaller leagues, the leagues we don't think about all the time, leagues in El Salvador and Central America, leagues in Africa, leagues in Asia. I don't know that any of them have as a mission statement. Maybe a few. This is a place for our domestic player to grow and learn. Right, to grow and that being there as a mission statement, as a guiding principle, because your goal is to maybe win the World Cup one day. Now, if you're Brazil and you've got 5 of those, you don't really think about it. You're just trying to make, everybody, Palmeiras and Sao Paulo, they're all just in it for themselves. They're all trying to win things, win the league, win Copa Libertadores, sell a player to Europe for $70 million or whatever it is. Like, that's just what they're doing. And then everything takes care of itself. The machine runs, and players come out, and they go to the national team, and hopefully you win things. Now, Brazil's not right now, which may cause a little bit of a reflection there. But that's kind of how it works. I do know that there have been countries that we think of as powers that have gone through a process of sort of rebooting their system. Das Reboot, right? The story of German football after 2002, going into a 2006 home World Cup and trying to find a way to do better by the domestic player. So I think that this is an interesting idea. The idea of, is Major League Soccer, let's put it this way, should Major League Soccer be focused as a mission statement on helping American players, on growing for the purposes of, again, maybe winning a World Cup for the U.S. men's national team, but perhaps even just kind of below that level, just because it's an American league, and it should be a place for American players, right? So Kelvin writes about Ramos and Harks and Alexi Lawless all leaving Europe to come back to Major League Soccer. He writes about Miola, Pope, Jones, McBride, Donovan, Dempsey carrying the torch for American players. And he notes that through 7 games of this season, no American player is among the league's top 15 scorers. And you have only Quinn Sullivan as an American among the top assist leaders. You do have Diego Luna, Jalen Neal. He mentions Reed Baker Whiting and Kevin Sullivan as emerging players. I think Diego Luna is a step beyond any of those. And Kevin Sullivan is, how old is Kevin Sullivan at this point? Help me out, Philly people. Was he 15? Is he even 15 yet? They talk about the teams that have some American players, Seattle, Dallas, Philly. Then you have teams that are more focused on international players. Orlando, Inter Miami, LA Galaxy. I'll throw the Timbers in there. How many Americans start for the Timbers on a weekly basis? So has participation from Americans dwindled? In fact, in terms of pure numbers, there are more Americans than ever in the league. Now, that's a function of 30 teams and the rules on rosters and players. But also, by the way, those rules kind of work against the American player because in the way our laws work, you can't tell a player who has a green card, well, you don't count as an American for the purposes of a job, right? Major League Soccer has to follow labor law, and labor law says if you got a green card, you're an American for the purposes of the job, or you're domestic. So Major League Soccer does that. And then what clubs do is they find ways to get green cards, or players get green cards through the normal process, and then they no longer take up an international roster spot. But now you've got a player who was born and bred somewhere else, taking up a spot that, a decade ago or 2 decades ago would have been there for an American player. So Kelvin writes about this issue and points out some players. And what I thought we would talk about is whether or not Major League Soccer and the limit it has on the number of foreign players is the best way to go. And again, that's a green card situation and it's American labor laws. Because if you compare this to, say, Liga MX, Liga MX is the easiest place to go for a comparison of a league that is interested, right? Let's say it that way, in developing domestic players, and is also kind of on the same level, roughly speaking, as Major League Soccer. Now, Liga MX is bigger in Mexico than Major League Soccer is in the United States, and I don't really want to get into that part, but this is just sort of an easy comparison to go to. Liga MX is very careful about how much foreign influence there is in the league. I believe, and look, this is still it's still a majority of players on the field, but they have a limit, 7 international players at any given time on the field in Liga MX. No such limit exists in Major League Soccer. No, as far as I know, there's no limit on the number of foreign players you can put on the field at any given moment in Major League Soccer. Liga MX has a limit of 7, right? In fact, I've even been reading some surveys from last year of players in Liga MX where those players are saying, that's too many. We should make it 5. It should only be 5 non-Mexican players allowed on the field at any given time, because look at what it's doing to our national team. Our national team is suffering. This is at the time. Now things have changed a little bit. But at the time it was, hey, we're not doing enough for the Mexican player. I reached out to Cesar Hernandez, who covers Liga MX in English. He lives out in California. Couldn't get him on the show, but really would love to talk to Cesar about this. But I asked him some questions. I asked him if he knew the number of non-Mexican players in the league. He did not off the top of his head. But I did find some visual aids. This is from FB Ref. So this is FB Ref. If you can't see it, you're listening on the podcast. What I've got in front of me is the breakdown by country number of players in Liga MX this season, or 2024-25. Because obviously we have Apertura Clausura. So there are 452 Mexican players in Liga MX across 18 clubs. That is, not even, it's gigantic in terms of the number compared to the total players. The next highest country is 41 with Argentina. Colombia 30, Uruguay 26, Brazil 20, the United States 17. By the way, did you know that Joe Corona is back in Mexico playing for Tijuana? I did not know that, but Joe Corona's down there again. Spain has 12, Chile has 11, Ecuador has 11, Paraguay has 9. Venezuela, Peru, Panama, a lot of Latin countries, obviously. France with 2. One of those is Andre Pierre Gignac. Côte d'Ivoire, not a lot. So how many African players are there in Major League Soccer? Now, it's a lot more teams, right? It's 30 teams compared to 18. But that percentage, that is fascinating to me. The league is not in a position, Major League Soccer is not in a position to impose strict rules on a lot of things when it comes to this. So I'm not even sure we could say, well, what the MLS needs to do is be like a Liga MX. And I don't know if we want that. Right? Do we want that? Is that a way for Major League Soccer to matter in the global market? If they're saying, we're an American soccer league and we prioritize the American player, and therefore these rules mean X, Y, or Z. And those rules have been liberalized over the course of the league's history. Right now, this has also coincided with more American players leaving American shores at the earliest opportunity. That's a thing. Now, there are definitely Mexican players who leave Mexico, but I think if you're talking about the pure numbers and maybe even percentage, Major League Soccer is sending more kids out, more players, American players out into the world than Liga MX is. So, and that's what a lot of fans want. That's what we want. That's what we want as national team fans. As national team fans, we want Major League Soccer to sell American players to quote-unquote better leagues abroad. In some cases, it doesn't work out. In some cases, it might be better if the player stays. Actually, mention Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan's already got his destination picked out. He already knows where he's going when he reaches 18 years old. I mean, something could happen between now and then, but right now, he's off as soon as he hits 18 or as soon as it's possible for Manchester City to get him out of America. And I think most of us are like, that's awesome. We're not thinking, oh, I really would like Kevin Sullivan to stay here in Major League Soccer and be an American star in this league. So I think this is a difficult, interesting question. Now, with 10 minutes left, and I thought it might be more of this, but with 10 minutes left, I'm going to throw up something else I put together with the help of the besties in the Slack. So if you are not a Patreon member, become one so you can have a say in things like this. Patreon.com/thebestsoccershow. You also get the Daily Davis. You might get a written post every now and then. It's really cool. It's really good. All right. This is a completely non-scientific breakdown of how MLS teams do in terms of it's not just developing players. Okay, so when I put this to the besties, one thing that was kind of hard to grasp is like I'm not talking about players who went on to the national team from these clubs. Like players these clubs developed that played for the national team. This is more of like an effort level thing, or how important it is to these clubs to develop players. Some of them do that part, and they don't give a shit if those players go play for the national team. They just want to develop players for their own purposes, and I'm fine with that. Right? That's what a mature soccer league should be like. That these teams are like, what's good for us? Develop some players? Let's do it. Are those players going to play for the national team? Sure, whatever. Major League Soccer has been in the business of promoting those players that do make the national team programs, and now they're doing it for everybody. Obviously, it's not just U.S. men's national team players that are in Major League Soccer. Right? Somebody said it earlier. CONCACAF is better because Major League Soccer has gotten better, and a lot of CONCACAF players have come to Major League Soccer. The league celebrates those things, sometimes to its detriment when it plays through international breaks. But this is my completely non-scientific breakdown of who does what. So killing it, like just developmental powerhouses by MLS standards. The New York Red Bulls, FC Dallas, Philadelphia Union. Now, I think you could argue that maybe RSL could be pushed into that category. I would not be mad if you wanted to make that argument. In category 2 is where RSL is, which is, quote-unquote, making a dent. So I got Seattle. Now, that's mostly because Seattle's always been a home of American players. They've developed a couple, and we might lose Obed Vargas, or I guess that already happened, but he's still an American-eligible player that they were willing to bring through. Reed Baker-Whiting, he's another one. Obviously, you got Roldan and Morris, and there's American players, Jackson Reagan now in the back. Whether they are national team level or not, kind of the idea is they are willing to play American players. They don't look past American players to go find some foreign player. They're not always trying to sort of avoid centering American players in their team. And maybe that is just circumstantial, but I kind of got to judge them on where they are right now. Seattle, Columbus, Atlanta, Real Salt Lake, Charlotte. I got Charlotte in there, and that's maybe just an Ajamang thing. I don't know. Maybe Charlotte could be too early. We could move Charlotte all the way down to the question mark category if people think that's where they should go. Now, I only put one Canadian team in here, and it's the Whitecaps, and really just because they got a couple of American players that are kind of important to their team right now. Sebastian Berhalter and Brian White. They're the only ones in Canada that's got like an American presence I can point to and say, hey, that's doing something. I know there are some Americans in Toronto, but NYCFC is making a dent. Colorado's making a dent. That's Georgie. That's, you look at that team, and across that Rapids team, there are several key American players, Cole Bassett, that kind of thing, right? And I think they do want to develop players. One thing that's really hard to read unless you are really into this stuff is how much these teams invest in their academies or what they're doing. And I saw our LA crew in the chat, in the Bestie Slack, which is Dustin and my boy Jay Rodius, who is, I think he's at a concert.
Jay Rodius.
Probably doesn't want me saying that. Probably doesn't want me selling him out. He missed the Best Soccer Show to go to a concert. live music? Like, what, bro? Anyway, the Galaxy and LAFC are tough. They're tough. Both of them spend money. Both of them look outside of American borders to find talent to bring in and help them win championships. They do have fertile grounds for developing players, right? They do have, they exist in a place that has a lot of players. Now, some of those players end up playing for Mexico. Some of those players get poached. Some of those players get sold. Some of those but that doesn't mean they're not trying. So I kind of give them a little bit of a pass. I got the Galaxy in a category called not nothing. Also in that category, Sporting, this is the third tier. Sporting, Inter Miami. All right, if you want to debate me about Inter Miami, that's fine. I can move them all the way down to question mark 2. They have a couple of American players that kind of are noteworthy. Then you have, and that's probably Jake Callender and Benjamin Krabaski. That's probably it. I got the Quakes in there. Could very easily move them down. Chicago, I think Chicago wants to do something, and they've got a couple of players. They just haven't really brought it to bear in the same way as some of the top upper-tier teams. Orlando City is maybe a little bit of a mystery to me. Now, you tell me whether Orlando City belongs there. And then almost nada, tier 4. Cincinnati, Minnesota, LAFC, DC United. DC United really belongs in a category all by themselves. They belong in a we don't do dog shit category because they don't do dog shit. Houston's down there, sure, bringing in an American player, having some American players. Maybe they deserve to be a little bit higher up. But I go off of what Pat Onstad told me that when he took that job, I was like, what about developing players in your academy, Pat? And he's like, well, we got to worry about our senior team first, and then maybe we'll get there. And I was like, okay, well, they have no commitment to developing players in Houston, which is kind of sad. The Revs, also almost nada. Maybe historically they've had a couple players. Every now and then somebody pops up, and you're like, oh, yeah. Obviously, no Buck kind of comes to mind. American, England-eligible player, get some time. Portland should be in a category of their own, too. Just haven't developed anything. And then question mark, this is an incomplete. This is we don't know where you're going yet with this. San Diego, Austin, St. Louis, which is a hotbed, which is a central place in American soccer history. And we'd love to see them start really pumping out St. Louis-bred talent. And then Nashville, I think Nashville, if they put some effort in, and somebody give me an idea of how much Nashville puts into their academy, I really think Nashville could be very interesting as well. But that's it. I mean, again, some of these teams could slide 1 or even 2 tiers, depending on how you read it. And depending on whether you care about their investment in their academy. So like the Union, there's no questioning the investment the Union put into their academy. Same thing for FC Dallas. Or you care about developing a senior level player who plays regular minutes. Different kind of question. If you care about actual national teamers and caps, that's different too. These are all different sort of ways to judge this. So threw that up there. Shout out to the besties for helping me out with that. Again, patreon.com/thebestsoccershow. To join up, a couple bucks a month, get daily dispatches. You get the bestie Slack access, all kinds of stuff. Bonus episodes going way back. Lots of fun stuff. Shout out to my man, Nicholas Soup and Salad, who I think was here, he was there a couple of weeks ago? Is that right?
The Sausage King of Chicago.
Came in, right? Joined me. I don't remember. Time is a blur, gentlemen.
I think I'm starting to like Cincinnati.
And ladies, too. And interesting. Thanks to Callie. Canadian Premier League was made to be a place for Canadian players, right? And they did that because they knew that the MLS teams, and there only being 3 of them, weren't going to focus only on Canadian players. They wanted to win. There weren't enough good Canadian players to win now, hence the Canadian Premier League, which was a smart thing for them to do. And now we're seeing that those teams can actually compete in meaningful games against teams like, teams in Major League Soccer, Canadian Championship games, CONCACAF Champions League games, Champions Cup games as well. Oh, I got like 2 minutes left. Who watched Inter Miami and LAFC last night? Who watched that game? Anybody? I did not stay up for Vancouver, although I should have. And my apologies to our Canadian brethren for missing out on Vancouver doing the deed again. Two rounds in a row. Vancouver has knocked off a Mexican opponent by matching them goal for goal and scoring more away goals. 1-1 in the first leg against Pumas, and then 2-2 in the second. Tristan Blackman scoring the 93rd minute. Remember when it was, well, it still happens, but in any other scenario, it's the Mexican team that always shows up with a late goal, that always finds a way to score late and break an MLS heart. In this case, it's the MLS team getting through. Vancouver, great job. Incredible stuff. And then obviously the Inter Miami and LAFC was a wild ride. Like, we had so many things happen in that game. We had a goal waved off because Messi tried to take it quick, but there was no whistle after a yellow card. It was supposed to restart play. We had people going apoplectic on the sideline. We had a fight after Messi got dumped. We had a handball that kind of like the handball from God. Like if Maradona scored the hand of God, then what is it that happened to LAFC is the ball falls out of the sky and two of their defenders bump into each other and commit one of the dumbest handballs you're ever likely to see. Like, I cannot believe that happened. And, of course, Messi beats Hugo Lloris with the penalty, which probably will be the story forever and ever. I mean, people will be talking about Hugo Lloris just cannot stop a Lionel Messi penalty. It's what he does. He scores against French goalkeepers, that particular French goalkeeper. And now we're going to get Inter Miami and Vancouver? Like opposite ends of the continent going at each other in a semifinal of CONCACAF Champions Cup, and we are guaranteed an MLS team in the CONCACAF Champions Cup final, which I guess is a good thing. It means a real shot for CONCACAF for an MLS team to win a CONCACAF Championship, which of course only Seattle has done in the modern era. Don't come at me, Galaxy fans. Don't do it. The other side is Cruz Azul and Tigres. So that will be interesting. Yeah, and look, Ustari was a show unto himself. Thank you to Lefty. Ustari, a show unto himself. Did not look the part, looked ancient and creaky, and then makes a couple of incredible saves that he really had no business making. And Denis Bouanga had a chance in added time to put away Inter Miami, to score the goal. They were obviously LAFC was down on aggregate, but if they had equalized with the away goals, they would have been through. Bouanga on the break, 1v1 against the defender? You would bet on Bouanga, and he didn't even put it on frame. It's pretty poor from LAFC. But congratulations to Inter Miami. This is definitely what CONCACAF wanted, right? And CONCACAF is hoping that the Canadians fall. Inter Miami makes the final. They would host. If Inter Miami beats Vancouver, they would host the final because they have hosting priority, I think, over both Mexican teams. All right, one more time, patreon.com/thebestsoccershow. Ratings and reviews for the show, the podcast. Like and subscribe on YouTube. That's always, always, always helpful. Really, really would appreciate that. Again, I'm kicking up the content levels, people. Not just on the Best Soccer Show, but you can check out Morning Kick Around as well. That's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern morning show I'm doing with Robert Kerr. We're covering all the big headlines in American soccer and sometimes a little bit beyond. So please support that show. We are creeping towards 2,000 subscribers over there. It's been a little bit of a slog. Trying to build a YouTube channel is not something I've done before in a meaningful way. So if you would go and subscribe to Morning Kick Around, you would be my best friend. And I would appreciate you very, very much. You can also get that as a podcast, too, if you like podcasts. So there is that. I've been, learning how to do better thumbnails for YouTube videos. So we post the segments over there on Morning Kick Around, individualized segments if you prefer that. Like instead of watching back an hour show, you can just watch the individual segments. So I'm doing stuff like this. Oh, let me take that down. I'm doing stuff like this. Putting Kevin De Bruyne in a Inter Miami shirt. I don't know. I just having fun. Anyway, thank you very much, guys, for participating in the Best Soccer Show this evening. Thank you to Dan Vaughn for showing up. That was really big. Helped me out. So I didn't talk to myself for a full hour. We're back at it next week. I'll see you. No, actually, no. I'll be gone next week. Sorry, Jerry Dubois. Off the hook, because I will be gone next week taking my kid on a college visit. So I'll see you guys in a couple weeks on the Best Soccer Show. Bye.
Damn, dog, that's in an approach.
Can I get a manager? Can I please get a manager?
We are at DEFCON 1.
DEFCON 1.
Another one.
Oh, it's incredible!
It was there.
Oh, here we go, saucing them up. Hit him. What?
What are we doing?
Calm down, Greg. It's soccer. It's soccer.
Get to the chopper!
Who asked those questions?
Zu viel Respekt für die Gegner. Zu viel Respekt für die Gegner.
WNBC. WNBC.
Michael freaking Arasco Fiscal.
Jay Rodius.